Grace Alden believed the world rewarded people who kept their lives sharp, tidy, and under control. She built her morning routine like a fortress. Same street, same timing, same coffee, same unbreakable stride that signaled she belonged to a different class of people ones, who moved the world instead of waiting for it. The only flaw in her perfect path was the man who sat outside the bakery holding a worn cardboard sign with the words, "Trying my best," written in uneven strokes. He was always there before sunrise, wrapped in an old coat and carrying a calm expression that irritated her more than she ever admitted. Every time she passed, she felt the same sting of judgment. "You could try a job instead," she muttered one morning, barely slowing her pace. Elias lifted his eyes, gentle and impossible to read. "I hope your day is kinder than your words," he said softly. Grace didn't answer. She didn't like the way his voice settled under her skin, quiet and steady, as if he were the one seeing through her instead of the other way around. She stepped into the bakery, bought her usual black coffee, and walked out, pretending she couldn't feel his gaze following her dot at work. People admired the life she had built: corner office, spotless reputation, and the kind of self-assurance that made others step aside. Yet there was one part of her life she couldn't organize into perfection. Her daughter, Lily, had been getting sick more often lately. Headaches that made her miss school. Faint spells that appeared without warning. A shortness of breath that doctors dismissed with temporary explanations that satisfied no one. Grace tried to ignore her worry by throwing herself deeper into work. But late at night, after the last email was sent and the last door in the house closed, she found herself sitting outside Lily's bedroom, pressing her palm to her chest just to steady the panic that one cold morning. Lily stood in the kitchen looking pale and distracted. "Mom," she whispered, "I feel dizzy again." Grace forced a smile. "Maybe you didn't eat enough yesterday. I'll pick up something from the cafe later, okay?" Lily tried to smile back, but her eyes carried the same fear Grace fought to hide. "I just want to feel normal again." "You will," Grace promised, brushing a hand across her daughter's cheek. "We're figuring it out." But she didn't know if that was true. Later that morning, Grace walked her usual path, coffee in hand, coat pulled tight against the wind. She spotted Elias ahead of her, sitting in his usual place. His quiet stillness annoyed her more today, as if his presence were a reminder of something she didn't want to face. "You shouldn't sit in the cold like this," she said sharply, stepping past him. "It's no wonder you look exhausted." Elias glanced up, his expression patient instead of defensive. "I'm here by circumstance," he replied. "You're here by choice. That makes your days healthier than mine." Grace rolled her eyes. "Spare me the philosophy. Everyone has choices." He tilted his head slightly. "Do they?" She didn't answer. She didn't like conversations she couldn't dominate, especially with a man she convinced herself was beneath her. She walked away faster than before, pretending the exchange hadn't unsettled her. By noon, her phone rang. Grace rarely panicked, but the moment she heard the school nurse's voice, her heart lurched in a way she couldn't control. "Ms. Alden, Lily collapsed during class. We've called an ambulance. You should meet us at the hospital." Grace felt her breath disappear. For a moment, the world narrowed to a ringing in her ears and a rush of cold up her spine. She grabbed her bag with trembling hands, told her assistant she had an emergency, and sprinted toward the elevator. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and fear. Grace pushed through a crowd of nurses until she reached the reception desk. "My daughter, Lily Alden, she was brought in a few minutes ago." The nurse nodded. "She's being evaluated. Please have a seat and someone will update you shortly." Grace didn't sit. She stood frozen in the center of the waiting room, fists tight, shoulders rigid, feeling like her whole life had cracked open. She stared at the double doors that led toward the treatment rooms, willing someone to walk out and tell her everything was fine, Minutes stretched into something heavier. When the doctor finally approached, Grace stepped forward so quickly she nearly stumbled. "She's stable for now," he said. "We're running tests to understand why she fainted. For now." Grace repeated, her voice breaking despite her attempt to sound controlled. "What does that mean?" "It means we'll know more soon. Please try to rest." Rest felt like an insult. Grace walked to the hallway, gripping the cold railing as her body shook with fear she couldn't suppress. She hated feeling powerless. She hated the way her chest tightened every time she imagined Lily scared and alone behind the hospital door as she tried to steady her breathing. She heard a familiar voice down the corridor. "I can sit with him until his wife arrives," the voice said. "He shouldn't be alone." Grace turned slowly. Her eyes widened. Elias stood a few doors away, speaking quietly to a nurse. He wasn't wearing his coat or sitting on the floor. He looked calm, steady, and strangely at home in the sterile hallway. The nurse nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Elias. You always know how to help." Grace stared, unable to reconcile what she was seeing with the man she mocked every morning. Her first instinct was disbelief, then offense, then something she didn't want to name. She stepped toward them. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. Elias turned, surprised but not intimidated. "Helping," he said simply. "Helping?" Grace scoffed. "In a hospital?" The nurse frowned. "Ma'am, Elias volunteers here almost every night. He supports families who don't have anyone else. He's one of our most reliable helpers." Grace's mouth fell slightly open. The ground shifted beneath her feet. Elias studied her with soft eyes. "Is your daughter the one they just brought in?" Grace swallowed hard. "Yes, I'm sorry," he said gently. No parent should face that fear alone. His kindness struck her like a physical force. She didn't know how to respond. She didn't know how to stand there without feeling exposed. For the first time in a long while, Grace felt something inside her begin to shake, something deeper than fear, sharper than pride, and she didn't know yet how much she would need him. The hospital lights dimmed into a tired glow as evening settled in, wrapping the halls in a quiet that made every sound feel heavier. Grace sat beside Lily's bed, watching the slow rise and fall of her daughter's breathing. Machines hummed around them, blinking with patterns she didn't understand but pretended gave her comfort. Lily looked so small beneath the blankets, her face pale, her eyelids fluttering with restless dreams. Grace brushed her fingers across Lily's forehead, whispering, "I'm right here, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere." But deep inside, she felt herself unraveling. Hours passed with no answers. Doctors moved in and out, speaking in measured tones that suggested caution, not certainty. Grace tried to hold herself together, but the exhaustion made everything fragile. When Lily finally drifted into a deeper sleep, Grace stepped into the hallway to catch her breath. She didn't expect to see Elias again. He was sitting on a bench near the nurse's station, speaking quietly to a teenage boy who looked terrified. Grace watched from a distance as Elias leaned closer, listening with a patience that made the boy's shoulders relax. After a moment, the boy nodded and wiped his eyes, then disappeared into a room down the hall. Elias stayed seated, staring at the floor like he was gathering himself. Grace's curiosity tugged at her, though she didn't want to admit it. She approached cautiously. "So this is what you do at night?" she said, folding her arms in a defensive stance. Elias looked up. "Yes, hospitals can be lonely places. People need someone to sit with them." She wasn't satisfied with the simplicity of his answer. "But why you? Why spend your time here when—" She hesitated, suddenly aware of the assumptions she had always carried. "When you could focus on fixing your own life?" His eyes were gentle, not offended. "Because helping others helped me first." Grace stared at him, confused. "That doesn't make sense." "It will," he replied, then added softly, if you ever want to hear the full story. She didn't answer. She wasn't ready to accept that the man she belittled might have more strength than she did. Instead, she said, "My daughter's condition is still unclear." Elias's expression softened. "That uncertainty is the hardest part. How would you know?" She snapped out he didn't flinch. "Because I've sat with parents who lost children, and parents who almost did. Fear is universal." Something inside Grace recoiled. She stepped back, unable to look at him. His understanding felt too close, too honest. For the rest of the night, she stayed beside Lily's bed, holding her daughter's hand and counting the seconds between breaths. Every time a machine beeped, she felt her chest tighten. Around midnight, her exhaustion pushed her to the edge. She closed her eyes just for a moment, hoping for a short escape. She woke to the sound of Lily whimpering. Her daughter's face twisted in discomfort, and her body curled as if trying to escape a pain she couldn't describe. Grace leaned over immediately. "I'm here. Tell me where it hurts." Lily's voice trembled. "It just feels wrong, Mom. Everything feels wrong." Grace felt tears burn her eyes. "I'll get the nurse." As she hurried into the hallway, she nearly collided with Elias, who had been walking past with a stack of blankets. "Is she having pain?" he asked. Grace nodded frantically. "Yes, please get someone." He didn't hesitate. He signaled the nurse, explained the situation in quick, calm words, and followed her back into the room. The nurse checked Lily's vitals, adjusted her medications, and assured them the doctor would come soon. When she left, Grace collapsed into the chair beside the bed, gripping her knees. Elias lingered in the doorway. "She be okay for now?" Grace's voice shook as she whispered, "I can't do this alone." "You don't have to," he said gently. Grace looked up at him, fighting the instinct to stay guarded. "Why do you care?" she asked, her voice breaking. "After everything I've said to you?" Elias stepped closer, his expression thoughtful. "I don't hold anger the way people expect. Pain taught me that bitterness only deepens wounds." Grace blinked, absorbing the weight of his words. "You talk like you've lived a whole life no one sees." Elias nodded. "Most people don't look long enough to see it." She exhaled shakily, her walls trembling. "Tell me," she whispered, surprising even herself. "Tell me why you're here." He sat in the chair beside her. "I used to be a paramedic," he said. "I spent years running toward emergencies, not away from them. But one night, everything changed. There was a car crash. I tried to save a little girl, but she..." His voice faltered for the first time. "She didn't make it, and I couldn't forgive myself. My life fell apart piece by piece. I lost my job, my home, my family. I stopped trying to stay afloat." Grace's breath caught. I didn't know." "You weren't supposed to," he replied. "People see what they expect." They saw a man on the street and assumed the story ended there. Grace stared at him, stunned by the depth she had ignored. His pain was real, carved into the quiet steadiness of his voice. "And now you volunteer?" she asked softly. "It's the only place I feel like I can still make a difference," he said. "Even if it's small." Grace lowered her gaze. Shame pressed against her chest like a weight. "I thought you were just..." She stopped, unable to finish her assumption. "I know," Elias replied kindly. Lily stirred in her sleep, drawing their attention. Grace reached out and smoothed her hair, her fingers trembling. "She's my whole world," she whispered. "I can see that." Elias said. Grace turned to him. "I'm terrified." "Of losing control?" he asked gently. "Of losing her," she corrected, her voice cracking. "Nothing else matters." Elias nodded, his expression filled with understanding. "Fear like that can consume you, but sharing it makes it lighter." Grace looked at him with a mixture of confusion and gratitude. She didn't know how to accept kindness from someone she had treated so poorly. Yet she couldn't deny that his presence eased something inside her as dawn approached. She felt herself leaning toward an unexpected truth. She needed someone beside her, someone who understood fear, resilience, and heartbreak. Elias wasn't the man she once believed him to be. He was something else, someone she didn't yet know how to face, but couldn't push away. For the first time since stepping into the hospital, she didn't feel completely alone. Morning light filtered weakly through the hospital blinds, softening the harshness of the night. Grace sat upright in the chair, her body stiff and aching, but her mind surprisingly clearer than it had been in days. Lily was still asleep, her breathing steady, though her face remained too pale for comfort. Grace watched her for several minutes, absorbing the fragile rhythm of each breath, as if memorizing it could keep her daughter safe. Elias sat quietly near the doorway, his hands clasped, his posture patient. He had stayed through most of the night, offering steady words whenever Grace felt herself drowning in fear. She didn't fully understand why he stayed, but she hadn't asked him to leave either. When Lily finally stirred awake, her eyes fluttered open with a weak groan. "Mom?" Grace leaned forward instantly. "I'm here, sweetheart. How do you feel?" "Just tired," Lily whispered. Her voice trembled, but her gaze softened when she noticed Elias. "You're the man from the hallway," she murmured. Elias smiled gently. "I am. You gave everyone quite a scare yesterday." Lily let out a small, breathy laugh. "Sorry." Grace brushed a hand through her daughter's hair. "You never apologize for being sick." Lily nodded, closing her eyes for a moment. "Who is he, Mom?" Grace hesitated. She didn't know how to explain what Elias was to her right now. Someone she once dismissed. Someone who surprised her. Someone who made her feel less alone. "He's someone who has been helping us," she said softly. Elias rose from his chair. "I can step out if you want privacy." "No," Lily said quickly, surprising both of them. "I like that you're here. It makes the room feel less scary." Grace blinked, moved by the simplicity of her daughter's trust. Elias nodded gratefully and stepped back inside. The doctor arrived mid-morning with test results that brought both relief and tension. Lily had a rare but treatable neurological condition, one that required ongoing monitoring and medication. "It's manageable," the doctor explained. "But she needs to stay for a few more days while we stabilize her." Grace absorbed the news with a shaky breath. Manageable. The word felt like a lifeline, even though fear still burned beneath it. "Thank you," she said, squeezing Lily's hand. When the doctor left, Elias leaned closer. "Now you can breathe again?" Grace let out a dry laugh. "I forgot how." "That happens," he said gently. "You've been holding your fear like a stone." She didn't answer, but she felt seen in a way she wasn't prepared for. She stood to stretch her legs, motioning for Elias to follow her into the hallway. "How did you know how to talk to her?" "To me," Elias shrugged lightly. "When you lose everything, you learn how to listen." Grace walked beside him, her thoughts heavy. "I judged you," she admitted quietly. "Every day. I thought you were someone who didn't try." Elias didn't respond immediately. "People see what their own pain allows them to see," he finally said. "You were carrying more than you realized." Grace stopped walking. "That doesn't excuse the way I treated you." "No," he agreed. "But it explains it. And it means you're capable of seeing differently now." His forgiveness unsettled her. She wasn't used to gentleness without conditions. They returned to the room where Lily had fallen asleep again. Elias settled into a chair, his presence steady and grounding. Grace watched him quietly, trying to understand the strange sense of safety she felt around him. Later, as the afternoon sun warmed the room, Grace finally allowed herself to open the door she'd kept tightly locked. "Tell me more," she said softly. "About what happened to you." Elias took a slow breath. "After the accident, I couldn't escape the memory of that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the mother screaming. I replayed every decision I made, every second I lost. I convinced myself I deserved to suffer, so I let my life unravel. I pushed away anyone who tried to help. Grace listened, her chest tightening. You carried that alone? For a long time, Elias said. I wasn't ready to face what I felt. And by the time I was, I had nothing left. Not even myself. But you're rebuilding, Grace said quietly. He nodded. Not in the way I imagined. But being here, helping families, feeling useful again, it brings pieces of me back. Grace felt her throat tighten. You're stronger than you think? He gave her a small smile. So are you. She swallowed hard, overwhelmed by the sincerity in his voice. She wasn't used to someone seeing the softer parts of her, the parts she kept buried beneath ambition and control. As the day went on, Grace found herself talking to Elias more than she expected. She told him about her childhood, marked by a mother who equated success with worth. She described the pressure she carried, the fear of failure that haunted every decision she made. She admitted how hard it was to parent alone after Lily's father left years ago, and how terrified she was of showing vulnerability. Elias listened without judgment, offering calm reflections when she faltered. You don't have to be unbreakable to be strong, he said. Sometimes being honest is the bravest thing you can do. Grace looked at him, feeling something shift inside her, something tender, unfamiliar and frighteningly hopeful. Near evening, Lily woke again, asking for water. Elias helped adjust her pillow, and Lily gave him a sleepy smile. You're nice, she murmured. Elias laughed softly. I try my best. Grace felt a warmth spread through her at the exchange. Later, as Lily drifted back to sleep, Grace stepped out into the hallway. Elias joined her, leaning lightly against the wall. She's improving, he said. I know. Grace's voice trembled. But I'm still scared. That means you love her, Elias said gently. You're allowed to be scared. Grace exhaled, feeling her emotions spill into the open air. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, he replied. Just don't carry everything alone. Grace looked at him, truly looked at him, and felt a deep sense of connection forming, something built on shared pain, vulnerability, and unexpected trust. But just as she began to feel the first fragile sense of stability, the sound of urgent footsteps filled the hall. A nurse rushed past them, heading toward Lily's room. Grace's heart stopped. What's happening? She whispered, terror gripping her. Elias's expression turned serious. Let's go. They hurried inside, their worlds tilting once more as they braced for whatever came next. The room felt colder when Grace and Elias rushed inside. A nurse was checking Lily's monitors, her movements brisk and focused. The beeping had quickened, each sound slicing through Grace like a blade. Lily's face was tight with pain, her breath shallow and uneven. Grace rushed to her side, gripping her daughter's trembling hand. What's happening? She asked, her voice shaking. Her levels dropped suddenly. The nurse replied, We're calling the on-call surgeon. She may need an emergency procedure to stabilize her. Grace's vision blurred. No, she was getting better. Elias stepped closer, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. Grace, breathe. But she couldn't. All the fear she had been holding back surged through her. This can't be happening, she whispered, leaning over Lily as tears spilled down her cheeks. Please, sweetheart, stay with me. Lily's eyes fluttered open, dazed and frightened. Mom, she whispered. Grace forced a smile even as her heart shattered. I'm here. I'm right here. You're going to be okay. Lily's fingers curled weakly around hers. Don't cry. Grace let out a fragile laugh, brushing her daughter's hair back. You're giving me orders now? Before Lily could answer, the doctor hurried in. We need to take her immediately. he said. We'll explain everything once she's in surgery. Grace's grip tightened. Can I go with her? For a moment, he replied gently. They rolled the bed toward the door. Grace walked beside it, holding Lily's hand until they reached the boundary where parents had to stop. Lily looked at her with wide, terrified eyes. Mom, she whispered, will you be here when I wake up? Grace leaned down, kissing her forehead with trembling lips. I will never leave you. Not for a second. Lily tried to smile, then closed her eyes as the team guided her through the double doors. When the doors shut, Grace felt something inside her collapse. She stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the closed entrance as if sheer willpower could pull her daughter back. Elias gently guided her to the bench nearby. Sit, he said softly. Grace dropped down, burying her face in her hands as her shoulders shook. I can't lose her. She's all I have. Elias sat beside her, not touching her yet staying close enough that she felt his presence. You're not going to lose her, he said. You've both come too far. You don't know that, she whispered. No, he admitted. But I know she's strong. And she has a mother who refuses to give up. Grace looked up at him, tears streaking down her face. How are you so calm? Because someone has to be, he said gently. And right now, you deserve someone steady. His words hit her with unexpected force. She reached for him, not thinking, just needing something solid to hold on to. He took her hand without hesitation, his fingers warm and grounding. Minutes stretched into an hour. Then another. Grace felt herself drifting between fear and exhaustion, her head resting against the wall as time blurred. Elias stayed beside her the entire time. He didn't speak unless she did. When she whispered fears, he listened. When she fell silent, he sat with her in the quiet. Finally, the surgeon appeared at the end of the hallway. Grace stood so quickly her knees nearly buckled. Please, she begged, tell me she's okay. The surgeon's expression softened. She made it through. It was a close call, but she's stable now. She'd be moved to recovery soon. Grace's breath broke into a sob of relief. She pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming uncontrollably. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. The surgeon nodded and walked away to finish paperwork. Grace turned to Elias, her whole body shaking. She's okay, she cried. Oh my God, she's okay. Elias's eyes glimmered with quiet relief. I told you she was strong. Grace threw her arms around him without hesitation. He held her gently, his embrace steady and supportive. She sank into him, letting the fear drain from her body in trembling waves. For several moments, she stayed there, breathing against his shoulder, feeling more safe than she had in years. When she finally pulled back, she wiped her cheeks, embarrassed by the intensity of her emotions. I'm sorry, she said softly. Don't apologize for loving your daughter, Elias replied. Or for needing someone. Grace exhaled shakily. You've been with us through everything. I don't know how to repay that. You don't need to repay kindness, he said. Just pass it forward. His humility left her speechless. When Lily was moved to recovery, Grace walked into the room first. Seeing her daughter resting peacefully, a soft flush of color returning to her cheeks felt like witnessing a miracle. Grace held her hand gently, overwhelmed by a wave of gratitude so deep it nearly hurt. Elias stood near the doorway, giving them space, but Lily noticed him and lifted her hand slightly in greeting. He stepped forward with a small smile. Told you you'd wake up, he whispered. Lily smiled weakly. You were right. Grace looked between them, amazed by how naturally he had become part of their world. Over the next few days, Lily's strength returned little by little. The sharp fear that once consumed the room softened to quiet hope. Grace found herself talking to Elias every chance she could, sometimes about life, sometimes about the mistakes they both carried, sometimes about nothing at all. Each conversation felt like peeling away layers she had forgotten she wore. On the day Lily was cleared to go home, Grace walked with Elias to the entrance. "You've changed everything," she said quietly. "You showed me parts of myself I didn't realize I'd buried. And you reminded me that broken lives can still build something meaningful." He replied. Grace hesitated, emotions tightening her voice. "I'm sorry for every cruel thing I said to you." Elias shook his head gently. "You were hurting, and now you're healing. That's what matters." Grace felt a soft warmth bloom in her chest. "I'd like you to stay in our lives," she said. "If you want to." Elias smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I'd like that." And as Grace walked out of the hospital with Lily at her side and Elias just behind them, she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time, a sense of hope rooted not in wealth or control, but in humanity rediscovered.